Thanks so much for joining us today on Feeling Good, sponsored by Warren County Community Services. I'm your host, Shelly Abrams, and today, I have to tell you, is my very first show where we are actually in the new renovated Channel 6 studio. And I was just amazed at how beautiful the walls look, the furniture looks, the rug, the tables. We're in a totally different, backdrop with our City of Lebanon, decorations here as well. So I'm just happy to be here, and I am very happy to introduce you to our guests today. Jen Miller is the Executive Director for the League of Women Voters of Ohio. And I want to take special opportunity here to thank Jen for driving all the way from Columbus to the studio today. And it was a very, very hectic day on the roads, correct?
It sure was.
Well, we are so delighted to have you here. I have to tell you, there's a story behind this. I met Jen Miller actually in person a couple of months ago when we attended an event in Cincinnati where you were actually representing the League of Women Voters, and there was quite a crowd of folks that were in attendance. And I remember going up to you after your presentation because I knew that we were from the same hometown. And I had to double check and say, Jen Miller, are you really from Shelby, Ohio? Because I am from Shelby, Ohio as well. Well, then we actually started chit-chatting about our hometown, which is 10 miles northwest of Mansfield, Ohio. So we're both from North Central Ohio originally. But wasn't it funny that when we started talking about Shelby, which is a small town but very active, very loyal, our alumni are going to have a big event in October, an all alumni weekend that's coming up, and our schools are excellent, etc. And I started talking about Shelby in the midst of all these folks from Cincinnati. And another gentleman said, oh, I lived in Shelby at one time. I mean, suddenly it was like here we were, three of us, and we were all talking that we were from Shelby, Ohio. So I thought it was just very interesting.
And we had a league member say, oh, I'm not from Shelby, but my parents were.
That's right, she did. And actually, she was greeting people at the front door and getting signatures. And we're going to be talking about what those signatures, were a sign up for. But Jen, tell our audience a little bit about your journey. What has brought you to the place that you are today? And you can start in Shelby, or you can start wherever you'd like to.
Yep. So I might as well start in Shelby. Just because that is where I grew up, and my parents had a bakery and a diner, and my grandparents were all along the Sandusky Bay area doing mostly agricultural business, and so I just had a really lovely childhood in that way, and regularly attended the Lutheran church there in Shelby, and I really came to understand how important issues were. You know, I was in my family business all the time, and how policies could affect our business. And our business was very close to one of the elementary schools, and just to see how policies affected children and families. And so I think I really just grew up caring about the world. I went to Capitol. I actually got a degree in vocal music and a degree in history and ethnic studies. And I've been living in Columbus for a long time, but I love Ohio. I love all parts of Ohio. And that's what really brought me to the League, because, you know, the League of Women Voters cares about all Ohioans and all voters. Voters are what we call our North Star. And we don't support candidates. We don't support parties. But we are always thinking about democracy and how democracy can be better implemented, if you will. And so throughout the years, the League of Women Voters has done so many incredible things, like the fact that our boards of elections are run by bipartisan teams, that even the machines are locked up by one Republican key and one Democratic key, right? All the work in terms of training poll workers and youth at the booth, having young people work at as poll workers, post-election audits, all these kinds of things are part of what the League does, along with thinking about voters with disability or college students and the various barriers that individuals may have, military voters serving overseas. We spend a lot of time thinking about how they can overcome barriers to the ballot box, how we can make sure that their voices are heard when they vote, and also hopefully teaching them how to find their lawmakers and elected officials and let them know what is important to them year round.
Well, I was actually going back to kind of the Shelby roots again. I was doing a little history research on suffragists a couple of years ago. And that's how I happened to connect with the Marvin Memorial Library in Shelby, and a couple of folks that were working on that as well I connected with, to find out what's the suffragist history in the Shelby, Richland County area, which I found very interesting. And it just, I mean, since I'm from Shelby, my mother was from Shelby, my grandparents were from Shelby, my grandpa was a merchant at the other end of town. He ran a dry goods store. And so your family was in the bakery on the west side, and my grandpa's store was on the east side. And I think I know that my mother was very involved with community events and so forth, but I think that's where I probably grew to appreciate just how important community issues were, because our families were involved, right? And we met people who were our customers.
Yep.
And we have always been very involved. So the history of the League itself, can you give us a little overview of, for people that might not be as familiar? I find it very interesting.
Yeah, so we have a very strong history of working on women's suffrage here in the state of Ohio, across the entire state. And the League of Women Voters was actually formerly the Ohio Women's Suffrage Association. And so we were working to get women the right to vote here in Ohio on all races. In the 1890s, we were successful in getting women the right to vote in school board races. And then as there was movement for the 19th Amendment, the suffragists of Ohio, throughout Ohio, were really important, because after Ohio voted to ratify, we continued our advocacy, because in the 1920 election, the two presidential candidates were from Ohio. So Cox from the Dayton area and Harding from the Marion area. And so we continued to, as suffragists, we continued to advocate and pressure those two candidates to pressure their parties to support women's right to vote. And so in May of 1920, it was Ohio Women's Suffrage Association convention, where folks came from all over the state. They voted to transform into the League of Women Voters of Ohio. Again, with this very nonpartisan approach of making sure that as women got the right to vote, that they would know the logistics, right? They would know how and when. Informed voters was important to us, so we actually started our voter guide, which we're known for nationally. You can learn about candidates and issues on your ballot. That actually started out of Cleveland. And so the groups that came together to form the League at that convention, there were 14 organizations that we kind of considered the midwives, if you will, of the League of Women Voters of Ohio. And that included very diverse groups. So nurses associations, there was an association of teachers, the Consumers League, the women lawyers, women reporters, women businesswomen, businesswomen, I guess I should say, as well as the DAR and the Federation of Colored Women's Clubs and the Council on Jewish Women. So just this wide range of women that all thought that what was really important was to have a trusted, neutral source that would help this newly enfranchised group understand how to participate in elections, understand how to participate as advocates. So early on in the league, we worked on things like ending child labor and ending forced marriages, really supporting school systems, local schools and local parks and so many other things. And that's our history. And today we fast forward and we're still thinking about all voters, and we're still wanting to make sure that our democracy functions well. And we say that we want to demystify government, because if people understand how government functions, they'll better be able to participate as voters and advocates.
Right, right. Well, I think it's just so interesting to see the Ohio connection with this national organization. And so let's go on with the League of Women Voters, which actually I am a member currently of all three. Well, I'm a member of the local unit of the Warren County unit, which will explain the difference between unit and then which is part of the Warren County, I'm sorry, it's part of the League of Women Voters of the Cincinnati area.
Right.
And then we are all part of the League of Women Voters of Ohio. So explain to our audience a little bit more about the difference between, for instance, the Cincinnati area League of Women Voters and the Warren County unit. How does that?
Yeah, so, well, first let me just say, when someone becomes a member, they pay their membership dues. Usually they do that locally. They immediately become a member of the Ohio League and the U.S. League. And that matters because we're at all three levels of government. And what our local members do is they help us understand the experiences of local voters. They help us understand, for example, what boards of elections might need so that we can advocate potentially for funding at the state legislature or different things. So they help us be very smart about the needs and experiences of voters and elections officials and poll workers in their area. And then that helps us when we are in regular conversations with lawmakers and the Secretary of State and other policymakers and partners about voting and the needs of every voter. Doesn't matter on what candidate or how they're voting on an issue or their party affiliation, we're going to advocate for them. And then at the national level, we feed up that information of what's happening at the local and state level to our national league, which is doing the same thing, working to make sure that voting is working for the people of this country, that our elections are secure, that voters know how to, what the requirements are for voting, and that all people who are eligible have the chance to have their voices heard fairly and freely.
Well, I was mentioning to you recently in our magazine, which I brought, which has Robert De Niro on the front, it was this particular article about ARP takes on voter education, and it was quite an in-depth article. You can see I put stars next to certain parts of the article, and I thought this is very important to all ages. But certainly in the ARP magazine, they focus on, usually it's the 65 and older age group, and I think that they are very loyal voters, wouldn't you say, for the most part, in terms of they want to know how to vote, and they want to be able to know how to vote, and they want to know the candidates, the issues, et cetera. So
yeah, so I would say that it's really important that all demographics of Ohioans are showing up and voting, because our government will better represent us and serve us if we're all participating. And it is absolutely true that seniors are a very strong voting bloc that consistently shows up to vote, and that is so important. And it can be hard for seniors to vote. You know, they might actually have to, maybe someone has always voted on election day at their polling location, but now they have more mobility challenges or hearing challenges, and so they're rethinking their voting plan. The voting plan is where you decide, are you going to vote absentee at the early vote center at your county or at your neighborhood polling location? And then what are the materials you need? What's the ID you need? How do you research what's on your ballot? All of these things are part of the voting plan. And I'm thankful that organizations like AARP are making sure that senior voters understand the importance of voting and some of those logistical challenges that they may have to overcome or rethink. We saw a lot of that during the pandemic, right?
For sure.
Where so many of our seniors were potentially at risk for COVID, and so they were voting by mail maybe in larger amounts than they ever have before. And that's just an entirely different process.
Right.
And so we do encourage every voter, regardless of age, belief, demographic, to really think about your voting plan and which way works best for you, and not to wait till the last minute. If someone is going to vote absentee or by mail, there's a lot of steps to that, and you're going to want to do that early.
Right, for sure. Well, what would you say currently are the issues that you are focused on right now?
Yep. So, and this is funny because, you know, I thought you were going to ask what voters are concerned about, and that's something that we look into, but not as much. Right now, we're really about the function of democracy. So we have volunteers across the state registering voters and making sure that they're thinking about their voter plan. We have lots of volunteers who are teaching people how to apply for an absentee ballot and track and return that absentee ballot, as well as that folks know the early vote schedule, because while we have a lot of days of early voting, the schedule is changes week to week, and in that last week, day to day. And so we have a lot of volunteers, again, just working on that logistics. We have volunteers that go into high schools and help teach civics and register voters. We think that's incredibly important. We have volunteers who partner with the Girl Scouts. We have a program called Voter Girl, where the girls get their civics badge. And that's particularly fun. We always have a mock election as part of that. So, you know, the little daisies, for example, they'll usually vote on what their favorite ice cream is. Chocolate usually wins. I'm not surprised by this. But the older ones will vote on, you know, how they might, you know, they'll be fundraising for a special trip, right? And they'll maybe decide what that trip or adventure is going to be. And they'll decide it actually often using actual voting booths. And all of this is about making sure that every Ohioan knows that this is a participatory sport, that we all should be involved in democracy.
Right, exactly. I was going to mention my granddaughter is or was a daisy. I think she's flown up now to the next age group, but she was so thrilled to tell me, she said, Grandma, we met the mayor of Cincinnati the other day, and we were in this chambers. I said, oh my goodness, I had no idea that that was part of scouting anymore. I mean, I don't recall quite that amount of experience when I was in Scouts, but I thought that's a beautiful opportunity, and the fact that she was so excited and she thought I would be excited, which I was very excited that she was, you know, involved with that. Well, I know that the league is very busy year-round, aren't you?
Oh, we are. The elections work is year-round, so because we are just constantly making sure the voters have what they need to succeed, and meeting with boards of elections and the Secretary of State kind of in the lighter months just to talk about election administration, how things are running. We do a lot of work recruiting poll workers and all those kinds of things. And you did ask about other issues. The other one that we're working on is citizens, not politicians.
Right.
So the League of Women Voters has been working on what's called partisan gerrymandering, which is when the map makers rig those maps for candidates of one party or the other. There's a few things here. The first is rig maps for candidates, not voters, because partisan gerrymandering, when maps are rigged, that harms every voter in the state of Ohio. If a lawmaker, once they take their seat, knows that they're going to win over and over again because of how the communities have been sliced and diced and smushed together, they don't have to listen to us. They instead can play to party extremes and big donors. And that's a problem for every single one of us. The League has been fighting partisan gerrymandering for over 50 years. And we have first fought the Democrats who are rigging the maps for lawmakers of their favor. And now we see maps that are more rigged for Republican candidates. But again, candidates and lawmakers, not voters. And we do that because gerrymandering is a way of putting the thumb on the scale unfairly, of not having a fair playing field for all. And so citizens, not politicians, what it would do is what we understand now is that it doesn't matter where you are in the country, when politicians make the maps, it's just too tempting to rig them for themselves and their friends. And they don't actually make these maps to benefit us, the voters, or to fairly represent us, the voters. And so let's take them out of that equation. It's time to take them out of that equation. And so Citizens, Not Politicians would be an independent commission of 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, and 5 independents. And I'm particularly excited about this party balance because Ohio is pretty balanced. And in fact, more Ohioans consider themselves independent than of either major party.
Right.
And maps have always been made by a combo of Republicans and Democrats. The voice of independence has been silent through this entire process. And I think most of us, right, even if we identify as more of one party or the other, we often switch parties, right? We think as an independent. We want a legislature and a congressional delegation that is listening to us and that is not rigged. And so we're really excited about this proposal, and we think that Ohioans are excited too. That's what we hear, is that as we have 3,000 volunteers across the state collecting signatures in every county, and people, Republican, Democrat, Independent, young, old, all races and religions and all counties, rural and urban and suburban, folks understand that our democracy is suffering right now, and one of the reasons is because of these rigged maps. One of the reasons is the way our communities have been sliced and diced and sometimes put with entirely different areas of the state. So there's a congressional district that goes from Lorain all the way to the Indiana border. So different. Those counties, those economies, so different, right?
Right.
And similarly down here, if you look at how the maps are, both at the State House and Congress, they really don't make sense for kind of keeping communities together that are more similar economically and socially. When we have these unusual districts, one thing we already talked about is that the lawmakers know they're going to win based on whether they have an R or a D behind their name. And so the primary becomes the most important part of the election. They're not competitive races once we get to the general. That's only a slice of the people voting in that district, right?
Right.
But it also means we get these real extreme candidates, that those who win are those who play to those party extremes and play to those big party donors. And then once they're in office, they continue to play to those party extremes and those donors, and they don't listen to us as the voters because they don't have to win their seat. So that's one really important issue. The other, though, is if you're a lawmaker and you're just trying to represent the needs of your people in your district, but it's so sprawling and it's smushing together so many different types of economies and communities, it can become very hard to truly represent the people. One part of the district can be very urban and maybe be based on science and research, right? And another area can be very rural and their entire economy is based on farming. It's hard to represent those two very different approaches. Things like transit or internet connectivity or education needs or healthcare needs, they can be very different depending on what county and what part of the state you're in. And if you look at our maps and how weird they are in terms of the shapes, what that means is it's hard for our lawmakers to balance the very disparate needs of the voters in those districts.
And wasn't this already, we thought, settled not too long ago? Didn't we already vote on this? And then what happened?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so we were part of the supporters of the 2015 and 2018 ballot amendments, as was both the Republicans and the Democrats, and so many others came out. So these amendments, one was supposed to end partisan gerrymandering for the state house in 2015, and the other was supposed to end partisan gerrymandering for our congressional delegation here in Ohio. The thing that it did was it kept politicians in charge, and we were hopeful that because they wrote these amendments and they put them on the ballot, that they would abide by them. But they didn't. They sliced and diced communities. They actually, what I would say is our current State House plan is an incumbency protection plan. They're not supposed to be thinking about how they're going to help lawmakers keep their seats, but that's exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. It's every lawmaker on that panel was thinking about how they and their friends could keep their seats. And that is not the way mapping should be done. And so that's why we're back to the drawing table, right? We tried to work with the political parties and the politicians now for 5 decades on ending partisan gerrymandering, and it hasn't worked. And so now it's time to take that out of the equation. Just take them out of the equation. If we put it in the hands of everyday people who don't have that self-interest, from every corner of this state, we'll have diversity of the types of education and skill sets, as well as age and race and parts of the state. And again, equal numbers of Republican, Democrat, and Independent. We're going to see maps that more fairly represent us, and we're going to see lawmakers who have to listen to us because their next election outcome isn't just guaranteed by the way the map was rigged.
And that's where we met, was
Yeah.
when we were signing the petitions as we walked in the
Yeah.
door of our hosts, we had a very, a very energetic crowd there that evening, and they, enjoyed hearing, what your thoughts were and so on and so forth, because I feel, this program is feeling good. We're supposed to be sharing issues and topics that hopefully our audience will feel good as a result of listening to. And today I want them to feel good because I want them to know that the League of Women Voters is working on our behalf, no matter what our political backgrounds are, that you are out there working every single day. Well, tell us, what would be a typical, I don't even know if there's a typical day, but maybe just, are you at the State House a good bit of the time? Are you in your office in Columbus most of the time? Are you traveling most of the time? What does it look like? Or it's all of the above, I suppose.
It is all the above, but I think that I've won the lottery because the main thing I get to do is I get to travel the state talking to hardworking Ohioans about democracy and voting and their power as voters. And I love that. Mm-hmm. I think the people of Ohio care very much about our democracy and our freedoms. And so that's really what I love to do the most. Of course, I'm in the State House and talking to lawmakers and leaders. I also am in the media, but what I love the most is spending time with the people of Ohio. And that's the one thing about this campaign that I think is really important to know, is that it really is driven by citizens, Ohio citizens, who are out there collecting those signatures, out there helping Ohio voters understand what this amendment is. And it absolutely is a campaign full of Republicans, Democrats, and independents of all walks of life. And, we have nurses and steel workers and retired judges and Sunday school teachers and pastors and so many different kinds of folks coming together to really end this long legacy that Ohio has of partisan gerrymandering that, we have some of the most gerrymandered districts in the country and have for many, many decades. And that's harming us. It's harming every single one of us. And so it's been really fun to work with our volunteers in the field on this campaign.
So for our audience who might want to volunteer, who might want to join League of Women Voters, what would be contact information? Where would they go? Okay, they listened to us today. Maybe they're taking notes and saying, I want to do this, I want to get involved, and so on. Where would they begin?
Well, first I just want to say that we are the League of Women Voters because we come from the Women's Suffrage Association, but we also have a lot of gentlemen in the league.
I was going to say, yes.
So we want you to join. And the more members we have, the smarter we are about the needs of voters and the perspectives of voters when it comes to democracy. And so you can actually just go to my website, the Ohio League's website, lwvohio.org. And you can donate, you can join, you can learn more about the Citizens Not Politicians Amendment. You can do so many things. And you're right, volunteers are the lifeblood of our organization. So for example, we have volunteers that their main thing that they do is go into nursing homes and make sure that folks have updated their voter registration, and that if they're having mobility challenges, that they know how to request an absentee ballot and track it, right? We have folks, as I said, that are going into schools and all these different places. Volunteers are who we are as a league, and it always has been. And so there's a lot of fun roles and jobs that you can do. We have volunteers that their job is going to county commission meetings, and it's just called Observer Corps, where they are watching what happens and kind of reporting out and just being eyes and ears for the people, so that when someone has a question about the county commissioners, or what's going on, that they can explain that. And then, of course, we have all kinds of folks that are poll workers and help us educate voters and go to those boards of elections meetings and advocate. So, for example, they might advocate for better signage for curbside voting for people with disabilities, or they might advocate for more education around polling locations that are moving, or things like that. But we also make sure that we show up for boards of elections when they are having funding constraints, and advocate for them at the county commission or at the state house or the federal level. All that's done by volunteers.
I know that I have a couple fellow members here in Warren County that are very devoted to attending the Warren County Board of Elections meetings. And then they report out and take, very specific notes, and then share them in our newsletters. They share them online. I know I brought one of your newsletters, the League of Women Voters of Ohio newsletters, and it says, this was even the 2023 edition. At that time, it was 103 years old. You're evidently 104 years old now. But it's very informative, the information that I receive via email here in Warren County, and they actually meet the second Tuesday of each month at the Deerfield Township offices. But you can also look up on their website for information, and the same with the League of Women Voters of the Cincinnati area. We attended a dinner down at the old historic firehouse for one of their special dinners last year, and it was so interesting and very inspiring to meet folks from Cincinnati who are and have been members for years. I mean, I've only recently joined. I've been a member now for 2 years. And I never really knew if there was a Warren County League of Women Voters, but we are a unit. Could you explain to our audience what a unit is?
Yeah, so a unit is when so a local league has its own board, and members vote on the leadership and the budget and the priorities of their local league at an annual meeting. They do the same thing every 2 years for the Ohio League, vote in a new board and budget and all those things.
Okay.
And the same thing at LWVUS. What a unit is a unit doesn't have to have all of that. It doesn't have to have a full board. It's a place where especially our voter education activities continue. So this is where you might focus more on candidate forums of local candidates, going to the Board of Elections and helping recruit poll workers, voter registration, those kinds of things, right? The unit, the Warren County unit, is actually part of the greater Cincinnati League. We also have in other parts of the state where the unit might actually be a part of the Ohio League.
Okay.
But the idea is that this is an area where we have members who want to make a difference, a nonpartisan difference for voters in their area, and they, but they maybe aren't ready or don't want to have to do all of that, you know, have their own budget and their own set of trustees and all those things, and so they can be a sub-unit, if you will, of a larger league.
Okay, very good. Well, I hope that our audience took notes today, and you can just watch this episode over and over and over again, because I think, and share this episode if you would, because I think that many people would certainly have known about the League of Women Voters, but I don't know that they might have all the up-to-date information about what the League does. And just as you mentioned, at the meetings I went to in Cincinnati, there were several men, and you know, that attended as well, very supportive of what the League does and so on. So even though the name is the League of Women Voters, men out there, you certainly are invited to join as well. Is there anything coming up, even though I know that you're working every day on these issues, any future maybe events that you want to promote or discuss?
Well, I encourage everyone to look at their local leagues, and you're right, we have leagues in Butler County, Warren County, Greater Cincinnati, Claremont, all through, up into the Dayton area, all through the state of Ohio. And so I do encourage folks, even if they don't want to become a member or they don't know if they want to attend some of those events. And so our local leagues do candidate forums and forums to help people understand issues that are on their ballot or how to research their ballot. A lot of times our leagues do programs just about other important public policy issues where you can hear from folks on different sides of an issue. And so I encourage folks to really look locally. At the State League, we're just going to be continuing to make sure that this election runs well, that the Citizens Not Politicians campaign runs well, that voters, regardless as to how they're going to vote, are participating and have everything they need to be informed and active voters. And we're just going to continue to have fun with each other. Everyone at League loves what they do, and that's because we love democracy. And it's very easy to put voters first when you realize that some of us just need to do that. We need to leave our party proclivities at the door, if you will. And we have young, old, and all party affiliations as part of our leadership here in Ohio, and we really invite you to be part of it.
Well, I thank you so much for making the extra effort to drive down in the midst here at the beginning of a holiday weekend, but luckily you're on your way to visit family, so I'm happy to see that was part of the journey as well. But I think that your explanations and your energy is making me feel good about what the League is doing to really help bolster our democracy, which we cannot take for granted. I feel like, you know, I loved civics, I loved history, I loved government. I was in student council, I went to Girls State. I was always involved with that kind of thing. And I guess I've never come to a time when I've realized that democracy today is really being discussed as in the balance, you know, if we don't work at strengthening it, it is, you know, it's fragile.
It is fragile and it's precious. And, you know, this is our Ohio. This is our community. This is our democracy. And the first step is to participate. And we are excited that everyone will be this fall.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you.
And we thank you for being a part of our discussion today in listening. And again, please like us, share us, and we plan on seeing you very soon. Hope you're feeling good. Bye for now.